Are you ready?
Yeah. Wait. Okay. Going. Setting up. Oh, there was some 400Ks in there, Finn. There was some 400Ks. Oh, that was dirty. That was so dirty. And welcome to Torghast. I was so excited for this place. For so long, we've been asking Blizzard to let us just kind of let loose and have fun without wrecking the game. And Warfronts and Islands seemed like the perfect opportunity for that, where we could have had vehicles and crazy things happening. But it's localized in those environments. And now they've finally done it. And boy, did they do a good job. For a first draft, my God, they should be proud of themselves for this thing. Torghast finally launched. We can only do it on 4.
So what happened? How can it be that one of the most promising features of the Shadowlands that absolutely destroyed BFA's Islands and Warfronts, let's be fair right now, is considered to be less than ideal, if we're being generous? What in the God's name happened with this feature? How did it go from something that people ran so many tens of thousands of times during the alpha and the beta and loved it, even when it had absolutely no rewards tied to it, comes out, has some rewards tied to it, and then is met with absolute, like, I hate this. What on earth happened? Well, let's look at a quick history, and we're also not just going to dump on Torghast, because I truly believe that Torghast is still one of the most promising features that Blizzard has put in the game in a very long time. I would hold it next to Garrisons in terms of potential. Now, I know a lot of you hate Garrisons. However, the idea, the premise, is good. It's just that when, and this is my biggest fear, the community has a very negative idea of a certain feature, Blizzard tends to kill it outright rather than iterating on it, growing on it. Garrisons had what we hoped was a lot of customization and features like that. What we actually got was a very pre-planned, set-in-stone kind of idea which didn't have any display of our character, had no display of our personality, and we didn't enjoy them too much. They became little Farmville fun games, which may have been Blizzard's intention all along, however our imaginations took us somewhere else. This time it's a little different. Torghast didn't promise something and not deliver. If anything, we went into it not really expecting much. What we found in the early testing was a very simple idea. You had the choice of normal, heroic, and then mythic modes. You choose the highest difficulty, and off you go. And it gives you all this range of floors. Remember the huge amount of floors that you could do initially in Torghast, where your characters got absolutely absurd, and they let powers run wild inside there. You could become so much more powerful than you possibly can now. So there comes the first thing. We asked during the feedback for Torghast for more. That's all we wanted. More of this, more combinations, more boss fights, more things if you're doing really well. The difficulty is good. It starts off very hard in some cases, and then you work your way up to try and getting a run going. Very similar to what these were based on. Roguelikes. That's what they were based on. They were based on your Binding of Isaacs, your Faster Than Lights, and of course the more modern Hades. Those are the kind of games this was the inspiration for. But somewhere along the way, they lost their path. They lost their ideal. They lost the initial goal. Or they didn't lose it, but they had to try and tie it back to the more casual player base of World of Warcraft, which isn't a negative thing. It's just how do you go about doing that? So while we were screaming for more, Blizzard implemented less. So over the testing, we saw they dramatically cut the number of floors you could possibly do. Then they came with the 2 different systems, and Torghast started to expand, especially as it got more popular. The more the feedback grew positive, the more Blizzard decided to add to it. And by adding to it, that often meant taking away. They no longer wanted these dramatic long runs where people were spending 4 or 5 hours in Torghast. Instead, they cut it down to the 6-floor wings you guys are more commonly accustomed to. This brought with it some warnings, especially from people like myself. It's not that fun at 6 floors. It's not that interesting. Please don't do this. Then they decided that, oh, you guys really liked the long runs. We're going to put the twisting corridors in. This is going to give you 18 floors, which was still really low by the standards that people were used to during the testing phase. Okay, 18 floors is better than 6, still doesn't allow your character to become completely absurd, but then they offset it. They said, this is just for fun. You guys say you're enjoying this for fun, right? Yes. Okay, so we're going to put cosmetic rewards in there. So obviously, this is where your imagination runs wild again. This is where you start thinking about the huge, enormous amount of cosmetic and fun things that they added to Islands. Everything from pirate outfits to pets and mounts, all kinds of collectibles that were available in Torghast. And as you well know now, that didn't materialize. So we'll circle back to that later. Let's go back to the 6th floor idea then. What's the worst thing you can do with something like Torghast or with any roguelike in general? Force people to do it. This is always going to be a risk. Once it's mandatory content, that really changes the dynamic of this kind of game. The whole point of roguelikes and the inspiration for Torghast is that you should do them at your own pace. Some people like to go slow, some people like to go fast, some people like to be overpowered, some people prefer more difficult underpowered runs, but they could do whatever they feel like. If they want to mix it up and do something different, that's entirely on them. First of all, there's nowhere near the variety of powers to offer that. And I don't really expect World of Warcraft to be able to deliver the type of variety that is existent in games built specifically to be a roguelike experience. Yet unquestionably, there could be more. It's pretty standard at this point that you would expect to find X amount of certain powers every single time you do Torghast. The likelihood is you always kind of gravitate towards a similar build, and the chances of even getting that build are pretty common. There are going to be some runs, especially on limited 6th floor runs, where you don't quite get what you want, but for the most part, you're going to see the same sort of powers every time you go in. However, when you look at a lot of roguelikes, the chances of seeing the exact same powers, or at least, say, a third of the same powers on every single run, is extremely low. They're designed to not have that happen, and to open up the door for more different builds. After all, at BlizzCon, that is what we were promised. You might want to go a certain direction with your character. Realistically, in practice, you're not going to get that much variation. There will be some, unquestionably, but you're unlikely to get that much variation on a run-by-run basis. So that became a problem. Let's talk about the release of Torghast and how it was met by the player base, which also made me pretty upset with Torghast, and I think was a big mistake. The sheer quantity of Torghast that players felt burdened to run. This is obviously a big issue with alts now, but let's not forget that mains as well had to suffer through this. Even with Blizzard's gating of the Soul Lash Torghast runs, we come back to two things. One, Torghast 6th floor is not particularly fun for anybody. Your character just doesn't develop or grow in a way that would make Torghast interesting or deliver that roguelike experience. And on top of that, you were required to do like 4 runs. Minimum. And with each run, especially for the more methodical players, taking around an hour, sure, some players can speedrun it, but a lot of players like to collect everything when they are actually inside there. This is like a lot of time. It's a lot of time for very, very little. Soul Lash by itself is not particularly rewarding. It simply isn't. And it was unnecessary to tie it into this forced or feeling forced run. I know there's people out there who'll say, well, you're not technically forced to do it. However, players who care about their power absolutely feel forced to do that. That's unquestionable, and that is always going to be a thing. So that put a bad taste in players' mouths. Every time that reset happened, 4 runs of Torghast. Even when it was down to 2, it was still kind of a pain in the arse. And then, of course, the difficulty went up. And one of the big problems with roguelikes shone its ugly head, especially when it's trying to merge with World of Warcraft. Class balance. Now, in a world where you're just getting cosmetics and you're hoping for overpowered builds, and even if you don't get overpowered builds, you still get something out of it, like you do in most roguelikes, this only delivers rewards when you finish. That's it. You have to finish in order to get your reward. Classes became massively imbalanced. So what we had is then the community at each other's throats. We had tanks and certain classes that could easily walk their way through Torghast, completely shitting on people who couldn't do that, whose classes had great difficulty getting through Torghast, especially in 6 floors. And that became another issue. People were getting to the end of Torghast, which is the only place to get their reward, and then dying, and then losing. And losing isn't a kind of fun, never mind, get over experience like it's supposed to be in a roguelike. You're intended to die. Finishing the run is really not the aim of a game. In a game like that, it's about making a fun build that you can just play. The gameplay is supposed to be the important part. This time around, the only reason to be there was just the ending. And for those players that failed, a really ugly taste. So no longer were you doing 4 runs that just took time, you now might be doing 5 or 6 runs because a couple of your runs failed. Big drag. For some reason, Blizzard then saw fit to delay the release of the Twisting Corridors for a really long time. I have absolutely no idea why they did this, other than the only real reward they had for the Twisting Corridors was the mount that is usable in the Maw. Now, the mount should be the grand prize. That's something that players should be working up to. Unfortunately, when they did release the Twisting Corridors, they literally did what they did with Soul Ash and kind of just dump it all out there and say, go. On top of that, they added no form of reward or progression. Let's go back to the inspiration for Torghast. The inspiration is roguelikes. What's the purpose there? I just said it's not really to finish the run. That's something you should do when you get good at the game. That's like a really end meta goal. In fact, the whole point is to do runs that gradually build up your meta power, that's power that you gain outside of the run, to make your next run easier. Meaning going for the final layer, layer 8, should be somewhere off in the distance as you work your way through it through a fun gameplay experience. What did we get with the Twisting Corridors? 3 rewards that happen at various stages, and all the runs kind of feel very much the same. And therefore, you kind of just had this enormous grind that suddenly appeared in front of you that a lot of players, including myself by the way, just couldn't be bothered to do. Frankly, as much as I dislike them all, being mounted in there just isn't a big deal, especially if you're capping Stygia. If you're capping Stygia, there is pretty much something to do. I'm not saying it's a fun thing to do, but there is something to do very regularly as you move through that zone. And the daily quests are spread out in such a way that they generally form a path. It's not that big of a deal, at least in my mind. It's definitely helpful, it's definitely better, but it's not that big of a reward. So therefore, I was kind of off-put by investing hours and hours and hours into Torghast, which I eventually did do for the sake of some content and making a fun stream and doing it with a friend. I did mine with Fingal. Then actually wanting to do it for the reward. I certainly didn't want to do it for a pet, I certainly didn't want to do it for a toy, and that's all it offered. What happened to these cosmetic rewards? Why were they not the same as Islands? Is it because Torghast was an unexpected success during the alpha and the beta, and then Blizzard was kind of stuck with what to do? I'm not sure what it is. But on top of this, Blizzard have obviously added more easiness, more accessibility to Torghast by adding more stuff for the vendors. They added more stuff to Venari to increase the easiness going in, which is their version of the meta rewards I just talked about. And I do understand that, but on top of everything else they added, it just kind of got to the point where you had so many choices that it just wasn't that interesting anymore. A big part of roguelikes that makes them interesting is limited choice. You're supposed to care about your decisions. Yet more often than not, at least me, when I get into Torghast and I'm presented with options, if I see a good one, great. If I don't, I'm not that bothered. I'm going to get to the vendor or something like that, and I'm going to have a multitude of choices in front of me, so I don't really care. And therefore, my choices don't feel that significant, which is another downfall of the way the system is implemented. So first and foremost, there was too much of it, and it was forced, and that never feels fun. Pushing players into content, I understand it needs to happen in MMO, but rewarding the Soul Ash for the first run would have been fine. Even just tying it to the quest line and then you get bonus stuff to craft your next legendaries later would have been a better solution in my mind. Torghast is there if you want to do it, but if you're just after the Soul Ash, we have this quest line that you have to travel through week by week anyway. That's where your Soul Ash will come from. When that's finished, then you can go and work through the layers if you want to earn some bonus stuff so you can craft more legendaries should you feel like it. Put it in the player's hands as to whether or not they want to do it, same as roguelikes. Twisting Corridors. Would it have been a problem to put Soul Ash in there instead of the 6th floor runs? The 6th floor runs are pretty easy. Cool. So if you don't really care about Torghast too much and you want a nice quick run, go and do your 6 floors. Do you fancy working towards them out? You can go and do it in there. The Soul Ash is capped anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you get it from A or B inside Torghast. It really is not of an interest. But instead of having both wings, that's kind of a problem because players feel the need to do both. And of course, the Twisting Corridors should be something people are working on for a long time, similar to Islands. Islands weren't a very popular thing, but still, they offered a lot of rewards for a lot of people that they very much enjoyed. And adding the island vendor in was a very big deal. However, I said we're not going to crap all over Torghast today because, again, I know the fun I had during the alpha and the beta. I know what it was that drew me to Torghast and the potential we saw there. So what kind of things would we love to see? Going back to it, there should be some form of reward for going super, super fast. That's part of roguelikes. If you're absolutely caning through the dungeon, there should be special unlockable bosses, extra wings, all that kind of stuff that roguelikes make interesting. They are aware their players are going to get very good, and they reward you with that. Choices and combos of powers need to be vastly expanded. It should not be the case that I know I'm looking, if I'm on the monk or someone's playing a monk, that they're going for the Vivify power. And it will show up because it's a common power. Doesn't matter, right? I know I'm going to get Blood Gorge Leech. I know that's going to happen. I know I'm going to get 2 aim shot bonuses on my Hunter. I know I'm going to find that because there's just not enough powers in there for that not to happen at some point. And I consider them just like, okay, I don't feel like I'm looking for a power. I feel like I'm missing powers until I get them. Oh, there they are. Now I have them. That's not the approach that should be taken in any of the games that this inspired. Okay, those are the two big points. There's far more content inside, which is secret, unlockable. I would love to find Easter eggs in there that you might notice a crack in the wall. You go through there, you'll fight something super difficult, super interesting that may give you a bonus reward, titles, cosmetics, mogs, whatever it might be. Stuff that diverts you off the path instead of going floor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the standard order. I would love to see some group-based content in here. Torghast is absolutely prime for something similar to what Legend of Zelda does regularly in their gauntlet runs, is that each floor drops you or raises you, in this case as you climb the tower. If you go in as a 5-man group, every room contains a different boss from the game that constantly keeps scaling up as you gain more anima powers for defeating the previous one. And having the group go up there. Why? For fun. And a lot of people come back to this. I'm not doing it without a reward. Rewards are fine. They don't need to be power-based. I'm totally okay with lots of rewards. If it's titles, achievements, whatever it is, but a group-based activity where you can get 5 of you together to go and have fun, which is fully possible in Torghast, but have a separate dungeon-style one that each one presents you with different environments would be so sick. It would be absolutely hilarious to get in there and just do it for fun, do it for titles, do whatever it might be. Not mandatory or anything along those lines, but really, Blizzard, you've got to expand the powers in here. You've got to make it more fun instead of it being afraid, I think. I think the word here is afraid of players going a little crazy in there. Because we've seen Blizzard try and implement those limitations over the course of the alpha and beta to stop degenerate gameplay. We're playing MMOs. We're going to do some degenerate shit. That's okay. Embrace it. Have fun with it. You're not asking people to spend their lives in there. You're just letting them go wild, which is what the big attraction to Torghast was. It let us go absolutely wild in a contained, sandboxed environment. All Blizzard have done is really rolled all that back, so now it's just kind of a grind that exists in the game, and it's really sad to see people saying, I would prefer to do islands. That would suck. Alright guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.